Hi, my name is Tom Boger. I'm a product line manager at Apple Computer, and I'm here to take you through an overview of our exciting new consumer computer, the iMac. Not too long ago, Apple had what amounted to be a pretty confusing product strategy. While the individual products themselves were good, it was very hard to figure out what computers to buy and when. So we kind of went back to the drawing board, and we figured out who our customers were and what type of products they want to buy. We basically simplified things into two types of customers that we believe we have. First of all, we have consumers as customers, and we have professionals as customers. And as it turns out, those customers really want to buy just two types of computers. They want to buy desktop computers, and they want to buy portable computers. So by coming up with this matrix, this basically represents Apple's new hardware product strategy. From a professional standpoint, we already have a product line. That's the PowerMac G3, and that's this quadrant right here. From a portable perspective, we also have a product line for the professional, and that's the PowerBook G3. From a consumer perspective, we will have a portable, and we'll be talking about that in the first half of calendar 1999, and that leaves us with this quadrant right here, the consumer desktop. And that's what the iMac is all about. It's about creating a computer for consumers. When we sat down 10 or 11 months ago and tried to decide what we should fill that consumer quadrant with, we looked out across the industry and we noticed a number of things. First of all, we noticed that while the computer industry's pricing has been decreasing towards the sub $1,000 price points, people are also making sacrifices to get to those price points. People are sacrificing things in three ways. First of all, those computers that people are buying for under $1,000 are very slow. They're buying yesterday's technology, so that's Cyrix processors, AMD processors, and Intel's new Celeron processor. That's number one. Number two, those products are actually, in our opinion, ugly. It's basically thrown together sheet metal, slapped together with screws, really not very aesthetically pleasing. And the third thing is that computers under the $1,000 price point are actually getting more complicated. So we've actually bought these computers ourselves. We've opened them up and tried to set them up ourselves, and we found gazillion manuals, and you had to have things color-coded just to figure out which ports things go into. So we wanted to address those three things with the iMac. So with the iMac, we didn't want to make those compromises. We wanted to bring a low-cost desktop to market for consumers, but at the same time, not have a slow, ugly, complicated computer. So with the iMac, we addressed those three things, with the iMac being redefining the boundaries of speed, style, and simplicity. But at the same time, the iMac is being created in the internet age. This is 1998, not 1984. And therefore, we had to make decisions specific to the iMac to make sure that we are allowing our customers to take advantage of all the wonderful power and creativity of the internet. So as I mentioned, again, the iMac, it redefines the boundaries of speed, style, and simplicity in an entry-level desktop computer. So what I'd like to do is go into each one of these themes for a moment and talk about why the iMac is so fast, and why the iMac is so beautiful, and why the iMac is so simple to use. So the first topic I'd like to talk about is speed. Now, why did we concentrate on speed in an entry-level desktop computer? Well, two reasons. First of all, we know that it's consumer software that requires the most processing power of computers today. Things like games, multimedia titles, edutainment titles, etc. So with the iMac, we wanted to make sure that it ran today's software really, really well. But we also know that consumers are always very hesitant when they're buying computers about their computer being obsolete in a short amount of time. So we wanted to make sure that the iMac was fast, not only to run today's software, but to run tomorrow's software really well as well. So how did we achieve such incredible speed on an entry-level desktop computer? Well, the answer is with what we've done with the logic board. So this is the logic board of the iMac, and it's basically in two parts. There is a daughter card, which contains all of the processing, and then there's the rest of the logic board that basically contains all of the I/O. So let's start with the daughter card for a second. On the daughter card, we have a PowerPC G3 processor. This is what is at the heart of why the iMac is so fast. It's a 233 megahertz processor. And in addition to having the 233 megahertz G3 processor, we've done something that our competitors haven't at an entry-level desktop space, and that is add 512K of backside cache. Now this backside cache runs at half the speed of the processor, or 117 megahertz. And having this cache together with the G3 processor is what makes the iMac so incredibly fast, and much faster than systems at a comparable price from the competition. But there's something new about the iMac that's different than any other Macintosh before this, and that is that with the iMac, instead of having 4 megabytes of ROM on the logic board, we have now taken most of the ROM and actually put it into RAM. Having this ROM and RAM architecture significantly speeds many of the operations of the iMac, especially things that uses interrupts. So things like surfing the web or multimedia or things that are constantly accessing the ROM have gotten much faster with the iMac. So even though the iMac is a 233 megahertz G3 based processor product, it's actually faster than previous Macs that we've shipped with similar specifications. So the G3 is the first reason that the iMac is so fast. Another reason that the iMac is so fast is because we've used the ATI Rage 2C graphics chip. The Rage 2C has both 2D and 3D acceleration, and it's a 64-bit chip. So it allows you to fly through multimedia titles and play games and go through edutainment titles really quickly. A third major reason why the iMac is so fast is we've embraced a brand new serial technology, and that serial technology is USB, or the Universal Serial Bus. And I'll cover more about that in a second. The last reason why the iMac is so fast is because we've put fast Ethernet on the logic board. In fact, this is the first Macintosh to have fast Ethernet built into the logic board. So what is fast Ethernet? Well, fast Ethernet is basically 100 megabit per second Ethernet. So this is the RJ45 connector on the logic board that allows the iMac to connect to an Ethernet network. And this Ethernet also auto-negotiates. So what it means is it can go at 10 megabits per second or 100 megabit per second. Now it depends on what your network is running at, and it basically works with the routers and switches to figure out, is your network running at 10 megabit per second or 100 megabit per second, and it actually runs at the appropriate speed. So so these four things: the PowerPC G3 processor with 512K backside cache, the Rage 2C 3D and 2D graphics accelerator, the USB bus, and the fast Ethernet is why the iMac is so fast. So to prove that the iMac is so fast compared to its competition, we went out and we tried to find the best, most reputable industry benchmark we could find that was also cross-platform. And we found one from Byte magazine. So Byte has a test called Byte Marks that you can run on both Macs and Wintel machines, and you can compare the two in terms of performance. And what we did is we went out and we found a comparably priced system to the iMac. In this case, it was a system that had a Celeron processor running at 266 megahertz. And we ran the Bytemark test on both the iMac and the Celeron-based product. And lo and behold, it looks like the iMac, via benchmarks, is over twice as fast than its competition. But something actually happened that was even more delightful, and that is we went out and we found the baddest, fastest 400 megahertz Pentium 2 based product that we could find, and we ran the same benchmarks. And guess what? The iMac is actually faster than that product as well from a Bytemark perspective. So Bytemarks are a way for us to compare the iMac with the competition. USB. I talked a little bit earlier about why the iMac is faster, and USB is one of those components. USB stands for Universal Serial Bus, and it's actually a new serial technology that was invented by Intel 3 or 4 years ago. It's found on many Wintel computers, and now it's making its debut in the Macintosh market on the iMac. USB has a number of great advantages that Macintosh customers have not had in the past. First of all, it has hot plug and play. Now the Macintosh community is used to plug and play, but not hot plug and play. And what this means is that you can actually connect devices into your USB ports as the computer is running. The operating system automatically scans for the driver for that device, dynamically loads it, and then you can use the device right away. You don't have to restart your Macintosh. So that's the first major advantage of USB. The second major advantage of USB is that it's extensible. Okay, so USB was designed from the very beginning to be extensible. And in the past, Mac customers have ran into limitations with existing Mac serial, i.e. having only 2 serial ports. With USB, you can actually add 127 devices to one computer. You do this with the addition of hubs and port replicators. So 127 devices can theoretically be hooked up to the iMac. A third major advantage of the iMac is that it's industry standard. This means that peripheral vendors are tremendously excited about Apple adopting the USB as its serial connecting technology. This means that third-party vendors can offer one product in the store that has a CD with both Mac drivers and Windows drivers. In the end, this means a much wider selection of peripherals for Mac customers, as well as lower prices and a much better business proposition for our developers. Here's a little slide which shows you a performance comparison between ADB, or the Apple Desktop Bus, traditional Mac serial technology with GeoPort, and USB, both at 1.5 megabits per second and 12 megabits per second. And as you can see, USB is far faster than any serial technology we've ever shipped. In fact, the fastest serial technology previous to USB is GeoPort, which is 2 megabits per second, and USB is 12 megabits per second, which is over 6 times faster. So that's USB, and that's all of the reasons why the iMac is so fast. The next major theme of the iMac is style. Now, people ask me, why would you concentrate so much on style in the iMac? Well, a couple of reasons. First of all, we believe that as computers become more and more ubiquitous and more a part of everyday lives, style and design are going to become much more important. And Apple just so happens to have one of the world's best industrial design groups designing our computers. So, from a style perspective, we think that people can appreciate the computing technology that they have in their homes or in their desks. An example of this is watches. 10 years ago, the average American owned one watch. And then Swatch came along and introduced style and fashion into the watch industry, and the average American owns 7 watches. And we think we can see the same type of reaction in customers with style with the iMac. Another reason why we concentrate on style so much with the iMac is people are putting out their hard-earned money to buy a computer, and we don't think they should have to settle for some ugly beige thrown together sheet metal that the competition offers. We want people to be proud of every computer they buy from Apple. So style. Let's talk about the things that we did from a style standpoint with the iMac. The first thing that people notice about the iMac is its industrial design. They notice how beautiful it is and how it seduces them to come up and touch it and feel it and take a closer look. We accomplish that a number of ways. First of all, we're using translucent materials. These translucent materials are actually polycarbonate plastics, some of the toughest plastics we ever shipped on any Macintosh previous. This is actually the same type of material that they make to use bulletproof glass. And then with the iMac, we actually have 2 types of colors. We have a Bondi blue and we have an ice color. And this color is something that, again, seduces people into touching the iMac, feeling the iMac, and something that they can be proud of. But the other thing about the industrial design is that it's also very practical. You notice that we spent a ton of time on the profile and the size of the iMac. This makes the iMac both beautiful as well as practical. As you look at the iMac, you'll notice that you can hardly find a straight line anywhere, but it's also very small in size. It hardly takes up any desk space whatsoever. This makes it very practical. We've actually gone out into classrooms and into people's homes and photographed where people place computers today, and it's amazing the small cramped spaces that people need, or that people use to put their computers in. And so we think the iMac is going to fit into many places where today's computers don't fit at all. Another aspect of the industrial design is that everything is in one unit. If you're looking at it from the side, we actually have a built-in foot, okay, here, which you can flip under and tilt the iMac 17 degrees, depending on your viewing angle. We also wanted to make the iMac very practical from where you access your cables. So you notice on the iMac, on the side of the iMac, there's a little door. And that's so that instead of having to reach around the very back of the iMac in a dark corner and try to access the ports, you can get to the ports on the side. But again, to maintain the integrity of the look and feel of the iMac, we actually have a little door here where we hide the ports, and we have little holes where you can route the cables out the front and the back. If we look at the front of the iMac, again, we carry out this translucent design. At the top of the screen, we have a built-in microphone. On each side of the screen, we have stereo speakers. Okay? Embedded in this stereo speakers is 4 megabit per second IRDA, which allows you to transfer information to other devices that support the IRDA standard. Right now, those devices can be things like PowerBooks, Newtons, and even the eMate. On the other side, on this side of the design, we actually have 2 headphone jacks. These headphone jacks are useful in both education as well in people's homes, where people, either from an education perspective, you want to have two students sharing the iMac with headphones on, or in the home perspective, or in the case of the home, you want to have two people sharing the iMac, maybe playing a multi-user game but not disturbing the rest of the people in the house. Continuing with the front of the iMac, we also have the power button right here. This power button has an LED behind it, so when the iMac is on, it's green. When the iMac is asleep, it's amber, and when the iMac is off, there's no LED. In the center of the iMac, we have a 24x CD-ROM, okay? And let's see, that's it for the front of the iMac. So here we have the back of the iMac. We have a little saying in Apple. We think that the back of the iMac actually looks better than the front of the competition. But in looking at the iMac, there's also a couple of things to notice. The major thing to notice is that we do indeed have a handle integrated into the back of the iMac. This handle is made for carrying the iMac, whether you want to move it from room to room or desk to desk. This handle is actually extremely tough and rigid and built right into the infrastructure of the iMac such that it can sustain 4 to 5 times its weight. The other reason for having that handle there is because it's part of the iMac structure. It's one way to lock the iMac down. So in a situation where you want to keep the iMac secure, you simply loop your cable, whether it be a piece of metal or fiber optic, through the handle, and you can secure your iMac to the desk. So this is the keyboard of the iMac. Now we've carried through the design language from the main iMac itself into the keyboard in the respect that we also have the same Bondi blue and ice colors in the iMac, and we even have the keyboards themselves being translucent. But as I mentioned with the iMac itself, not only is the keyboard beautiful, it's also very practical. So one of the things you might notice is the fact that while the iMac is a full-size keyboard in terms of distance between keys, it takes up very little desk space because we've removed a lot of the extra plastic that sits around the keys of most keyboards. We've also, even though it's a very compact in size, tried to maintain most of the functionality of a standard size keyboard. So across the top we still have our function keys. Over here we still have our help, home, page up and page down keys. And we even have an inverted T right here, which is particularly important for whether you're doing work, which is navigating through spreadsheets, or whether you're playing games where an inverted T is really important. The other nice thing about the keyboard, it has a built-in foot, which you can move up or down, giving yourself 6 degrees of tilt, depending on how you're sitting in front of your iMac. And probably what's most important about this keyboard is not what's on the outside, but what's actually on the inside. So this keyboard is actually a USB hub inside. So we actually have 2 USB ports, one on each side. And that's not just for putting the mouse on the right or the left, which you can do. It also means that depending on which side you put your mouse, the other port is an open USB port. That means any USB peripheral can be hooked up to that port, whether it be a USB printer, USB scanner, USB input device, USB mass storage device. That is a full USB port, just like any other USB port. And finally, we have the mouse. Again, we carried through the design language of the CPU itself in terms of translucency, and we wound up with what we think is the coolest looking mouse in the computer industry. A couple of things about the mouse. You notice that the mouse is very low profile. This is to ensure that the bend in your wrist is kept to a minimum. You also notice that the mouse is smaller than traditional mice. This is because this is more of a fine motor skill mouse. It's meant for you to move it around the table with your fingertips as opposed to the palm of your hand. It's kind of like when you're a little kid. When you're a little kid, you first learn to write with your whole arm, and then you later learn to write with just your fingers. That's the principle behind this mouse. Basically move it around with your fingertips. And it's not that there's not any fun with this mouse. This mouse has translucent materials, and we actually have a multicolored mouse ball in there so you can see inside, and if you're incredibly bored someday, you can move the mouse around and see through the translucency and see the multicolored mouse ball in the mouse. So, from a style perspective, the iMac has a number of things. It has a very unique industrial design that's not only beautiful and attractive to look at, it's very practical because it keeps your desk space used to a minimum. Also, the iMac has a gorgeous 15-inch monitor. We spent a ton of time making sure the sharpness and focus and clarity from edge to edge on this monitor is absolutely the best on the market. In addition, this monitor has 3 resolutions, 640 by 480, 800 by 600, and 1024 by 768. And what's unique about this monitor is the scan rates at these resolutions are incredibly high. So at 1024 by 768, the scan rate for this monitor is 75 Hertz. At 800 by 600, it's 95 Hertz. And at 640 by 480, it's 117 Hertz. What this means is that you get a rock solid, stable display with virtually no flicker, which reduces eye strain and just makes the iMac a pleasure to look at for hours on end. As I mentioned, we have a door on the side which allows you to close up the cables that are going into the ports on the side of the iMac, but at the same time there are ports so the cables can route through the front and through the back. And finally, we've carried the design language into the keyboard and mouse. So that's the style aspect of the iMac. The third major aspect of the iMac is simplicity. Now, as I mentioned, we have gone out and we've bought products from our competitors. We've unpacked them, tried to set them up ourselves, and we quite frankly think that computers are actually getting more and more complicated to use. Whether it be speakers that you got to hang off your monitor or things that you got to screw in with a screwdriver, they're just not making things simpler for customers. So we wanted to address this with the iMac. We wanted to not only give people incredible power and the latest technology, but continue that tradition of Macintosh and give them a computer that's really simple to use. So we did this in a number of ways. First of all, we looked at what the out-of-box experience was and we improved it. So one of the things that we've done is we have worked with a company called Earthlink to improve the ease of which a customer can sign up for the internet with the iMac right out of the box. So we bundle something called Total Access with the iMac, which if they use the Internet Setup Assistant will launch a customer right into Total Access if they choose to sign up for an ISP, and that'll help them get on the internet as quickly as possible. Another major thing that we've done with the iMac to make it simple to use is we've integrated a lot of technologies. So obviously we've integrated the monitor and the speakers, but we've also integrated things like the modem. So what it means is to get an iMac up and running out of the box, you simply follow 4 or 5 steps. You unpack the iMac, put it on the desk, plug in the power, plug in the mouse to the keyboard into the iMac, hit the power, and it comes on, and you're ready to roll. The operating system is pre-installed, most of the applications that come with it are pre-installed, and you'll be up and running within minutes. A third major way that we've made the iMac simple to use is we focused on the essentials. We haven't cluttered it with extraneous technologies that people might not use. We focused on having a great monitor, great processing power, and great access to the internet. A final way that the iMac is simple to use is, of course, last but not least, Mac OS. The iMac comes with Mac OS 8.1. And again, we think that Mac OS is still the world's easiest to use, most powerful operating system, whether it be from plug and play to great multimedia to consistency between applications. Mac OS is still the simplest operating system to use. And again, the iMac is a Macintosh through and through. So those are the major themes of the iMac, but we wanted to add additional value to the iMac itself as we brought it to market. So with the iMac, we also wanted to include a really great collection of bundled software. So we think we've done that. With every iMac in the United States, we include Internet Explorer 401 to do web surfing and web browsing. We include Outlook Express 401 for email, and those applications are both from Microsoft. We also include Netscape Navigator for those customers who would rather have Netscape as their default browser. In addition, we include AppleWorks, which is the renamed ClarisWorks, and AppleWorks gives you word processing, spreadsheet, and database functionality. We also include Quicken 98 Deluxe for Macintosh, which allows people to manage their checkbook and do home finance and home banking. We include Williams-Sonoma Guide to Good Cooking, which is actually a recipe program, which actually can not only give you recipes for really good dishes, but also if you're not familiar with how to do things, it would actually show you a little QuickTime movie to do things like how to carve a turkey and how to cook a roast. We also include FaxSTF for managing faxes, both sending and receiving faxes. And we include Kai's Photosoap from Meta Creations, which allows you to touch up any photographs that you may have on your iMac. And for the gamers out there, we include 2 really hot games. One is Nanosaur, which is a Mac-only game from a small company called Pangea Software. And we include MDK from Interplay, which is a futuristic 3D adventure game. So one final thought with the iMac is to think value. In addition to the tremendous speed and the outstanding style and the simplicity of the iMac and its bundled software, we've also thrown some things in here to really round out the value of the iMac. So for instance, this has a 4 gigabyte hard drive. It also has a 56K modem that supports both V.90 and K56 Flex protocols. So basically all the things that I just covered, in addition to the bundled software and the keyboard and mouse, is all available for the suggested retail price of $12.99, and it's going to be available in August. So the iMac in and of itself is something that we're very proud of and we think is going to make a major impact on the industry. But there's actually a message behind the iMac that actually transcends the product, and the message is simply this: Apple as a company is back. Apple as a company is back to one simple philosophy, and that is making the world's best personal computers. It's back to sweating the details, to being an industry leader, to moving the industry forward, to setting trends again, to thinking different. So again, Apple is back. We're proud of the iMac, and we hope you enjoy it. Thanks.
Hi, I'm Mike Shabanik, and I'm the USB Product Marketing Manager at Apple Computer. I want to take a couple of minutes to describe this new technology called Universal Serial Bus for you, and talk to you a little bit about why Apple adopted Universal Serial Bus and is migrating toward it away from some of its legacy I/O technologies, and also explain some of the advantages you'll get and customers will get by adopting USB and plugging in USB peripherals into Macs like the iMac and other Macs in the future. So first of all, we want to take a look at how we've always connected peripherals in the past. So in the past, it's always been a plethora of solutions. There's been different connectors for different types of devices. Macintosh has used different connectors than PCs. Let's take a look for a second at how PCs have solved this problem of attaching peripherals. Then we'll take a look at the Macintosh solution and see where there might be room for some improvement. So first of all, if you take a look at the back panel of a PC system today, you're going to see a lot of different connectors. In fact, you can count them out on the screen here from left to right. There's audio in and line in. There's PS2, there's serial ports, there's a game port, a parallel port. This doesn't even show things like Ethernet and SCSI, and maybe in the future FireWire and some of these other things, or USB in this case. What this means is customers who buy a device have to know in advance, do they have a port, and if they do, is it available for the device they want to plug in, or is it already used up? Because of course there's a limit to the number of ports you can have. So in the PC space, it's very confusing. There's a lot of things you have to know or have to have, and if the device or the port is not plugged in or on this board initially, you have to open up the computer and add a card. So if we look at some of the issues surrounding the Wintel space, we see a couple of things. First of all, if the connector is not on the system, you have to add it, which means opening up the computer and pulling out screws and bolts and putting in a new card, configuring that card once you have it installed, not to conflict with other cards or ports in the system. So in fact, it's possible to have a shipping system in the PC world that has open space for cards, but not any open configuration slots, if you will. No available upper memory addresses or IRQs or DMA channels, or all these things you have to configure or figure out to make the card actually function. So there's a lot of work involved in adding peripherals in that sense. Even if you add those peripherals, the technologies included on these cards or on these motherboards is somewhat limited in performance. So even when we have the ports installed correctly, we only have, say, one parallel port or 2 serial ports, and we may need more ports for more devices because we want to add more things to the computer. So this is still somewhat of a jumbled mess, and it's leaving the PC user in somewhat of a quandary as to how they actually attach things and when they have enough ports. Let's take a look at how the Macintosh has solved this problem. So for example, in a Macintosh, one of the things Apple has been very well known for, in fact famous for, is ease of use and plug and play. So we have standardized on 3 technologies in the past: ADB, Serial, and SCSI, and these have been included in every system that we've shipped. So it's been very simple for customers to add peripherals to a Macintosh. There's only 3 choices, and the connectors are very different, so it's very easy to tell which device plugs into which port. But well, in fact, continuing on, it's often never required to open up a Macintosh to add a new device. You simply plug the device into one of the ports that's automatically included in every Macintosh. Configuration is pretty much a trivial thing. You just plug it in, maybe run an installer, and it's ready to go. But there are still some places where we can improve, and in fact we want to improve, and using a new technology like USB allows us to improve. So let's take a look at some of those places where we could do better. So for example, if we take a look at the ports we talked about, ADB, Serial, and SCSI, the performance on those is sometimes limited. So in the case of ADB, we're talking about only about 10K per second, which is fine for keyboards and mice, but is not fine for some of the future things that are coming that we might want to take advantage of. So performance there is somewhat of an issue, although it's very good at plug and play. With serial ports, we have a better performance. We have about 230K per second, but we only have 2 ports, and adding more ports is very difficult. In fact, going past 4 ports is nearly impossible. It takes a lot of work, and it's a unique solution. We'd like to be able to add more ports or add more devices to our computer much easier than it is today. We also have this technology called GeoPort, and like ADB, GeoPort is proprietary to Apple, so there haven't been a lot of solutions built around this technology, making the variety of choices you have somewhat limited. It does provide better performance, up to 2 megabits per second, but again, it's somewhat limited in its actual use by third parties and even by Apple. So as we talked with customers, we realized there are a lot of things that they want that aren't covered by the technologies we've included so far. They've done this very well, but there's some other things we could do to improve this. So one of the things customers have asked for specifically is, allow me to plug in more devices than just the number of ports I have on the back of my computer. This is particularly important when we talk about portable devices like PowerBooks, where the space on the back panel is somewhat limited, but we might want to plug in a lot of different peripherals at different times. So technology that would allow further expansion outside the box would be fantastic. We also want to reduce the cost and increase the selection or the choices of these peripherals. Choosing a technology that's industry standard that can be used across platforms is a great answer to that, and that in fact is what USB represents. We also wanted to enhance compatibility of our devices. So today, devices that work for Macintoshes work across all the Macintoshes. But what would be even better is to work across any computer system. That would allow people to leverage their investment over a much broader number of systems and be able to get better advantage of the investments that they make. We also want to increase the performance of devices that we attach, as we mentioned before. And we want to reduce the complexity of adding these devices. So, for example, what makes Macintosh great is that it doesn't take a lot of administrative overhead or people or time to add things to your computer. So with Macintosh, more customers use more different devices on their same system than a comparable PC user, where it's much more difficult. So we want to continue that simplicity going forward. Developers also have their own set of needs, and these revolve primarily around helping them get a better return on their investment. So today they might design a device, be it a game controller, a joystick, or a modem, or a printer, and that device in the past was either a Macintosh device or it was a Windows device and used different connectors and different software. So rather than allowing them to develop the next generation of that particular device, they in a sense had to recreate it by creating it twice or maybe 3 times for various platforms. Well, this slows the process of innovation. We want to enhance that going forward. So again, Apple's choosing technology which leverages their investment. A single device can work across multiple different systems. It also allows them, by being able to produce just a single bit of hardware, to be able to easily forecast the numbers, leverage the volumes, and thereby lower the price to consumers and to retailers, and makes it easier for resellers to stock the right device because it's the same for any customer that might walk up. So one of the neat advantages is potentially a customer can walk down an aisle and find a device for whatever system they happen to have. And you won't have this artificial division of one platform, Macintosh aisle or Windows aisle or Unix aisle or some of these other things. So USB is a great technology that addresses many of these issues. USB is industry standard, so there's a consortium of companies that are developing the specification and building products. In fact, there's actually over 500 companies that are registered with the USB Implementers Forum to investigate or develop products both in software and in hardware for Universal Serial Bus. So the number of devices and the number of companies invested in this technology is huge, and we're just on the cusp of just a waterfall, if you will, of devices and solutions coming to market. And now with iMac, Apple is ready to take advantage of those, provide that choice to customers. Fundamentally, USB is faster, and it's simpler, and it costs less, and it gives us a wider choice. So USB runs at 12 megabits per second. And we mentioned earlier what the performance was of previous technologies. This is a huge fire hose, if you will, of data bandwidth to make devices work even better. USB is cross-platform, and USB allows expansion up to 127 devices. So where before we might have had 2 connectors for serial, let's say, and we plug in a modem and a printer, and now I buy a camera, I have to unplug something to get the third thing in. With USB, we can literally unplug something and plug it in, and it will dynamically identify that device and configure it for use. Or we can extend the number of ports Even though my iMac or Macintosh might have 2 or 4, I can get up to 127 things attached through these extension boxes called USB hubs. So it's a great technology, and it addresses a lot of these issues customers and developers have been asking Apple to solve. Now, USB, as I mentioned, is cross-platform, and it has been shipping in the form of hardware ports on PC computers for several years. And in fact, the specification for building a PC mandates that these companies put these ports in the systems. Now, interestingly enough, Windows 95 offered a little bit of support for USB, but it was so clunky that very few companies actually took advantage of it. With the release of Windows 98, Microsoft has greatly enhanced its support for Universal Serial Bus, and thus we see a lot of products coming to market. Well, interestingly enough, also, Apple has introduced iMac at about that same time. So just within a few weeks apart, iMac will be shipping and support USB on the Mac OS platform, meaning those same devices can be used in either case as long as there are drivers available. And in fact, many companies have come to Apple and asked how to create those drivers for Macintosh. So the same device can be used on a Windows PC or a Macintosh. And in the future, Unix, because those companies will also be supporting the Universal Serial Bus standard as well. So it's a great leverage point, and it makes for a lot of great solutions. So let's run through specifically some of those advantages we mentioned before. With USB, everything's attached externally. You don't have to open the computer to put in anything or configure anything. It's just like stereo components. You take a cable and you plug it in, so your receiver connects to your DVD player or your Laserdisc player or cassette player, and everything just works together. It's very similar with USB. USB also is much more automated and dynamic. So when you plug in a device, the device has information inside it. It has special firmware, we call it, which contains information about the device. When it's plugged into the computer asks the device for that information and automatically configures it and gets it ready, recognizes it, and in fact even loads the software driver that enables that device to be used with the system. So when an application launches and wants to make use of the device, like a scanner or a camera or a printer, it's ready to go. All of that's done in an automated fashion, just a few seconds as you plug the device in. As I mentioned, USB is extensible up to 127 devices through the use of hubs, and offers much higher performance than what we've had with legacy I/O technologies in the past, both either in the Windows market or in the Macintosh market. So let's take a look at the screen here, and you'll see a bar chart which identifies the relative performance comparison of each of these technologies in the Macintosh space. Now, long and red is better, short and wide is worse. As we mentioned earlier, ADB runs at about 10K per second, which is, again, sufficient for keyboards and mice, but not particularly sufficient for some of the other devices that have come out since those devices were invented over the years, and the ones that will be coming down the pike. Serial ports on Macintosh run at about 230K per second, and in fact, we've doubled up serial ports to use local talk and sometimes geoport technologies. Local talk, our networking protocol, or physical hardware protocol actually, Apple Talk packets run across it, runs at about 230K per second. Apple's including 10 megabit Ethernet to replace local talk going forward. And in fact, with iMac actually is shipping auto-switching 100 megabit Ethernet. This is huge data rates. So 50, 100, several hundred times faster than local talk, and industry standard as well. So we think that's a great technology in iMac and in future Macintoshes. USB runs at 2 different speeds. Both can be running at the same time. There's no degradation when a high or low speed device is operating. And in fact, you probably won't even hear about what a low speed device is or see it marketed in any way. It's more of just a technical detail that it's possible to create a lower cost device using lower speeds when higher speeds aren't necessary. A typical example might be a mouse, which will never run at a very high rate of speed to have smooth functionality on the screen and never have any devices attached to it to have to worry about passing high-speed data. And we can keep the price low by using low-speed grade cables. But at its maximum, USB runs at up to 12 megabits per second. This is a little faster than your 10 megabit Ethernet is today, where you have tens or hundreds of computers sharing a 10 megabit wire to transmit data. Here you have 12 megabits dedicated to just the peripherals you attach to your personal computer. So again, it's an incredible bandwidth enhancement over the old technologies. Now, USB isn't everything to everyone. There is another technology Apple will also be using called FireWire. FireWire runs at a huge data rate, extra fast, 200 and 400 megabits per second. So it's for those ultra-fast devices like digital video cameras where you want real-time, full screen, full motion images coming across the wire. It costs a little bit more, but it's more capable for those extra special applications. USB is very cost-effective and is more widespread. So both technologies complement each other, and you'll see both in future products. Just to do a quick comparison between USB and FireWire, you can see on the chart that actually a lot of the features are the same. So they're both multi-platform. They both provide power to devices across the same cable as the data transmits. They're both hot plug and play. And there's a couple of differences I wanted to point out. FireWire is peer-to-peer, so devices can talk directly to each other, whether they're peripherals talking directly or computers talking directly. With USB, you have something called a master-slave relationship, which basically means the computer controls all the devices attached to it. So devices can't take over the bus. They don't try and have a priority over the other one. The computer that the customer or you are using actually manages all those devices attached. So everything works very, very smoothly. As we mentioned earlier, USB is extendable to 127 devices. FireWire is extendable to about 64 devices. So a little bit of difference there. But primarily, FireWire is for these special applications with very, very high bandwidth requirements. USB is for just about everything else. So what do I need to actually get USB running on a Macintosh? Well, you're going to need three things. You're going to need a Macintosh with built-in USB ports. You're going to need a Macintosh operating system version that supports USB. And of course, that comes in iMac, both of those. We're including macOS 8.1 with iMac, and that understands USB. And you need a USB device. And in this case, we're picturing a USB 4-port hub, but it could be a printer, or it could be a camera, a scanner, a gamepad, a joystick. There's thousands of different types of devices that can be supported across USB. So how do you make it function? Well, it's actually pretty simple, or as we like to say, easy as 1, 2, 3. So the first thing you have to do is plug the USB device into the open port on the computer. Any port's fine, they all work the same. When you plug that into the computer, the USB controller chip in the computer will actually talk to the device. As I mentioned earlier, it has information. They'll exchange some information, and the Macintosh will try and identify the appropriate software driver that matches the device. When it finds a match, it automatically loads it. Now, you might think this takes a couple of minutes, but actually it only takes about a second or less, so it's very, very quick. It almost feels as though it's instant when you plug the device in. So where is it that you plug these devices in? Well, you plug them into USB ports. And on the screen, you can see a sample of what's called a stacked USB connector. This is one USB connector stacked on top of the other. So in the same enclosure, you have two ports, if you will. Now, these are just two access points for the same bus. So that same 12 megabits per second is shared among all the devices attached. But as it turns out, a lot of devices can share that bus and not show a lot of degradation in speed. So things run very smoothly. I think you'll be surprised at how smoothly they run, even though they're all sharing that same bus. These ports or connectors usually appear on the side of iMac, maybe on the back of some other computers. They can be on the keyboard like we have with iMac. They can be in external hubs. So you'll see them in different places. But primarily, a USB port is a USB port. So if it's available and open, you can plug a device into it. I have a picture here of the cable comparison between USB and FireWire. So I actually have with me a USB cable. And what I want you to notice is it's a simple single cable. It's very thin. The connectors are very small. And the close-up of these connectors is there on your screen. There's basically one type of connector, a type A connector that you'll see most often. It's the one pictured in the center. This is the connector you'll see dangling off of a device. Now, if a device has a cable that's removable, the part that connects to the device, like the printer or scanner, will have a B connector. And they have a different end on them so you can't make a mistake. You'll always plug them in correctly. The rectangular part always goes back toward the computer, this way, and the square end, or the B connector, always points toward the device. So it's never hard to figure out how you actually connect these things together. I wanted to show the FireWire connector on the left next to that center connector, the type A USB connector, because they're very similar. Now, it's impossible to actually make a mistake and plug them in the wrong place because they are shaped a little bit differently. The FireWire connector, if you notice, has a rounded corner or side to it, and it actually has 6 conductors inside. The USB cable is perfectly rectangular and has 4 conductors inside. So they are a bit different, and in fact, to help you identify them, we've put different icons on the cables, as you'll see in the picture. So if you just match up the icons on the hub ports or the computer with the icon on the cable, you should have no problems at all. Now, the way you extend USB past just the number of connectors that you have is by using USB hubs. In this example, we have a Paracom quad hub or 4-port hub, and it acts as both a bus-powered and self-powered device. Hubs fall in those 2 categories. So, for example, if you plug the hub directly into the computer, it can actually draw its power and pass power down to other devices coming from the CPU across the USB cables. If you prefer or a device needs more power, you can attach its AC adapter into an AC outlet in the wall and provide more power to those ports. Typically, a self-powered device with its own AC adapter can provide about a half an amp to each port, about 500 milliamps, and when it's drawing power from the computer, about 100 amps. So there's only one caveat you have to remember when you're attaching or extending USB, and that is that you cannot plug two bus-powered hubs together because the second hub won't have enough power from the first one, who's drawing it from the computer, to pass on to its downstream devices. Now that might sound complicated. It's actually not, because most hubs come with an outlet, and if you need more power, the Macintosh will display a dialog and say, please plug in more power. So it's very, very simple. Let's go on and talk about a typical configuration. Now, you might get the impression that you always have to have a hub. And in fact, a hub is an optional device. They cost it right now about $100 US for 4 ports, and they'll come down in price as time goes by. But they are optional. Remember that if all of the ports fill up, you just disconnect the device you're not using and plug in the device you want to use. And it's automatically identified and configured and ready to go. So you can literally just switch connectors anytime you need more devices attached. Hubs are as an option if you want to have lots of devices attached simultaneously. So it's more of a convenience in that sense. This is a typical configuration for iMac. So iMac includes a USB keyboard and a USB mouse. It has 2 USB ports on the side panel, and the keyboard doubles as a USB hub with its own 2 ports for downstream devices. In this case, we wanted to attach a printer, so we attached the printer directly to the iMac side panel, the keyboard to the side panel, and the mouse to the keyboard, leaving us 1 extra opening or 1 free port. So let's run through what you might encounter and how to resolve the problem. In this case, we decided to attach simultaneously, and again, I could have just unplugged things I wasn't using and plugged these in, but for the sake of argument, we're going to attach all these at the same time. We're going to put together a joystick and a disk drive and the printer along with our mouse and keyboard. Now that's 5 devices, and we only have 4 ports on iMac, so we've elected to add a hub in the center of this picture, plug these devices into the hub. But there's a slight problem, and you might not catch this, so I just wanted to point it out. In this instance, remember, the keyboard doubles as a bus-powered hub. It's bus-powered because there's no AC outlet connector on it to plug into the wall. That wouldn't make a lot of sense. So it's drawing its power from the computer, but this hub in the middle of the screen is taking its power from that other bus-powered hub, making there not be enough power to power on those downstream devices. So there's a couple of interesting and easy ways to resolve this. The first one would be just plug in the AC adapter that comes with the outboard hub, the standalone hub in the center of the screen. That'll provide enough power to those ports. Everything works great. If you don't have that hub, or that adapter rather, it's very simple to solve as well, so let's take a look at that. Actually, you just reconnect the cable from the hub on the printer so that the hub is connected to the powered port on the Macintosh. That gives it full power to pass downstream to the other devices. It's a very simple, easy way to resolve this issue. Now again, most people won't even have a hub. They won't have to worry about it. They'll just unplug the device they're not using, plug in the device they want to use, and they're off and running. The hubs are there as an option for expansion when you want to have lots of devices connected together all at the same time. Now, as I mentioned, there's thousands of different types of devices that can be supported with USB. This screen shows a sample of some of the categories or classes of devices. And there are lots more, but I thought this would be a good list to get you started. So in the first list, we have this thing called human input devices, or HID devices. You might hear that term from time to time. This is all the traditional pointing devices you attach to your Macintosh. So keyboards and mice and trackballs and trackpads and game controllers and joysticks and that sort of thing. There's also another list called mass storage. These are the devices that you would typically think of as maybe a zip disk drive, and in fact iOmega has announced a USB version of their zip drive. SideQuest has announced a 1 gig removable Spark drive that could be attached this way. And of course, iMation and Panasonic have announced together the Super Disk drive, which reads 120 megabyte floppy disks and old 1.4 meg floppy disks. It's a USB device as well, and that's supported on Mac OS. We also have a whole category of imaging devices, so cameras and scanners and desktop video cams and those sorts of things. There's a category for displays. Some of you may be familiar with the ColorSync displays, which have a video out connector and also an ADB connector for controlling the characteristics of the display. Well, in the future, those displays could be made with a video out connector and a USB connector to do those control codes. So you may see some devices in the future that utilize USB technology. Communications devices like DSL modems and cable modems and ISDN modems, traditional 56K modems, can be attached through USB also. Those are called COM devices, or the COM class. And of course, you can attach printers. So it turns out Epson and HP and Alps are all working on adapter kits for the printers they have out in the market today to attach to USB. And in the future, companies are working on how to deliver USB native printers with just the USB connector in the back. You just use that simple USB cable that I showed you a little bit earlier. So let's review some of these advantages for USB. As I mentioned earlier, and I'm sure you are aware of now, I hope so anyway, USB is a standards-based solution, so it's multi-platform. The same exact hardware is identical for every one of those platforms. The only difference is software. So companies are likely to put in a CD-ROM in the box that has different drivers for different OSs, making that same package work for any customer. In an institution, the same device could be shared across multiple departments in an institution, in a school, in different rooms, at home in different rooms of the house with PC devices and Macintosh systems as well. It's hot plug and play, so you can plug a device in or unplug it without having to restart the computer or shut the computer down or put the computer to sleep, which is tremendous. You don't have to stop working to take advantage of a device. Now you may have to do an installation and a restart the first time to get the drivers loaded, but every time after that, you just plug the device in when you need it, it starts working. USB also reduces the administrative cost of managing peripherals because you never have to open the box. You can just plug the device in when you need it. You don't necessarily have to add a card or configure memory or do all those sorts of things that are traditional in the PC environment. So it's very much a Macintosh-like technology. It's also very extensible, and in fact, it's just kind of an added bonus, because some devices are low power, they can actually draw their power from the bus through the hubs or through the computer without needing their own AC outlet. So if you're like me and you don't have enough of those AC outlets in your house, which very rarely do we, these devices actually don't need that. They just simply plug into the USB connector and they get both power and data. Apple will be introducing USB in the iMac computer system this August. iMac includes the USB connectors in the keyboard and the side panel, and the Mac OS 8.1 for iMac includes the USB information to take advantage of these devices. So look forward to that in August. Apple will also be introducing USB in many other products to come, so look forward to seeing USB products and systems from Apple in the coming years. Now, if you need more information about USB, there are a couple places you can look. So for Mac OS compatible USB products, Apple has a third-party site on the web that's www.macsoftware.apple.com, and there you can actually search and find USB compatible products as well as other software and devices for Macintosh. There's an online store. It's owned by someone else, but if you just need to find devices, that's a good place to look, and it's www.usbstuff.com. That's a great place to look. And the USB organization itself has their own website. This one's a little tricky because it doesn't end in com. It's www.usb.org. You can actually get the specification and see what's happening in the USB industry. And finally, Apple has its own site where you can actually download a driver development kit. So if somebody out there wants to write their own driver, getting the kit to do so is free. You just visit the usb.apple.com site, download that kit, and you can actually write drivers for any device that's out there. So if you need to contact us, those are some great sites to take a look at. You can learn a lot more about USB. I hope you've enjoyed this time learning about USB and some of the advantages for Macintosh. I think it's going to be a great technology, and any investment you make or customers make in this technology is going to last a long time in the future because this is Apple's direction moving forward. Thanks for joining us, and I hope to see you soon.
Hello, my name is Stan Ng. I'm a product manager in our Power Macintosh group. I'm here today to talk to you about our G3 all-in-one and the iMac and some of the differences between our two products for our education customers. The introduction of the iMac has created a lot of excitement in our education community because now we're able to offer two very compelling choices for our education customers. And these two choices are supported by the fact that they have very strong and fast processors, powerful processors to grow into the future. They also have industrial designs that are really designed with what our education customers want. And they both have incredible multimedia capabilities. Well, to illustrate some of the differences, I'd like to focus on two aspects of the Power Macintosh G3 all-in-one that differentiate it from the iMac. The first is expandability. The expandability of the G3 All-in-One allows our customers to add additional Ethernet cards, multimedia cards, or video cards whenever they desire to grow into the future. So we have 3 standard PCI slots that are easily accessible through the pull-out tray on the G3 All-in-One. There is also an internal expansion bay, which allows you to put a internal zip drive or internal hard drive to add storage capacity to your G3 All-in-One. The second area of differentiation between the two, on the G3 All-in-One, you have high quality and affordable multimedia creation. And what I mean by multimedia creation is that you can now take, on one of the G3 All-in-Ones with these video options, a camcorder, Laserdisc player, or even bring it in from cable TV to take that video into your computer and do very easy video editing. So what we've done is also bundled with these AV configurations of the G3 All-in-One an easy-to-use video editing package called Avid Cinema. And Avid Cinema allows you to take that video and edit it very easily, add music, add transition effects, add titling, do everything you would want to do with video editing in a very easy fashion. And so what we have is a very easy yet powerful video editing solution. What we also have in terms of multimedia capabilities on the G3 All-in-One is easy and intelligent video mirroring. And this intelligent video mirroring allows you to connect a TV monitor directly to your G3 All-in-One through an S-video or composite video cable and mirror what you have on your screen out to the TV monitor so you can show your students, for example, what you're doing. This slide here illustrates the differences between the G3 All-in-One and the iMac. As you can see, there are very few differences, and mainly the differences have to do with that expandability and the multimedia authoring capabilities that I just mentioned about. In general, the capabilities of both machines serve our education customers with all the features they've requested. And so with the introduction of the iMac, we now have a very complete and full product line for our education customers, and much choice and much flexibility for what they would want based on price and capability. Thank you very much.